How to get started investing in property. How did I get started investing in property 30 years ago? And what lessons can you learn from that if you're getting started in property today? This was the subject of a podcast I recorded with Kevin Stewart for his channel. Kevin Stewart, of course, is a former Liverpool football player. He's also played for Hull City, believe it or not, and he runs a podcast series called The Muddy Game. So he had me on as his guest, and he recorded this interview with me where we covered exactly this topic. So that's what you're going to get from this video, that podcast recorded with Kevin Stewart, in which I'm going to cover property investing strategies when I got started in the 1990s and what is applicable right now to those getting started today. I'm going to talk about specifically what strategies work today and what strategies don't work today, how you can learn more about investing in property, how to educate yourself. And I appear on the Sky TV show Property Elevator, where people apply and come on the show to get their property deals funded. I'll be sharing some special insights and reveals, if you like, from series 4 of that show. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon. We release a lot of content each and every week. Also smash that like button, it really helps us out, and enjoy the podcast.
Today's guest is Ranjan Bhattacharya. I was really interested in speaking with Ranjan, someone who's been investing in property for decades. He's seen it all, he's been through it all. He also had the very first property training company in the UK. So I was super interested to see what he thinks the industry in terms of investing and education has changed over time and what he's done to adapt. It was good to see what he's currently got on the go, including a TV show, also what he's investing in and his take on which strategies investors should be looking for. So I hope you enjoy the podcast.
Around about 2003, I spoke at the Property Investor Show in Excel, and they used my picture on the promotion. So I was all over the Tube and the Metro and all these magazines. And at that time, virtually every boss I'd ever worked with got in touch with me and basically said, I wish I'd done what you did.
Yeah.
Tell me more on this, that and the other. Follow a tried and tested method. You can get there too.
Yeah.
It's just about having that drive and vision to get on with it.
I was wanting to start by saying you're like one of the real OGs in property. That's how I kind of felt when I researched you, like the real OG in property. You know, you've seen it all. You've been through a lot of cycles, and you've been investing in property since like the 90s. So what I wanted to start with asking, there was a thing on social media that was going around a little bit. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it was a lot of people in this day and age maybe complaining, saying that getting involved in property back in the day for their parents and grandparents was a lot easier than now. What's your take on that?
Come on. I mean, the best time to get involved in property is basically now.
Yeah.
You know, people use that as a procrastination excuse. There are always different opportunities at different times. There are different opportunities. I mean, I've been doing this since 1990, as you said. Every 6 or 7 years, the market changes, the opportunities changes, the rules change, the taxes change. So it's different strategies, it's different things that you're doing to optimize the circumstances at that time. So someone doing it 10 years ago did different stuff, but that doesn't mean that you can't do that stuff now. But there's certainly stuff you can do now, which you couldn't do back then, which is worth learning about and getting involved in.
Yeah. So you don't think that's true? You think it's different? But in terms of the level of difficulty is the same.
It's in many ways it's less difficult.
Right. Why do you say that?
I think when I started, you could have the knowledge, but I think finance was a real challenge back then. The availability of finance was massive. Now, if you have the knowledge, I think there's so many more options to raise finance for a particular project than we had when we started out. So that's a massive differentiator for starters.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I guess a lot of connections are being made online in terms of finding investors, and of course you guys didn't have that then. So at that time, when you was investing in property and you did need that finance, how did you guys go about?
I'll give you some examples. I guess I should have given you some examples. I mean, I remember in the 1990s, I'd go to a property auction.
Yeah.
I'd have ideas of what I could do with properties and But back then, you could count the number of bridging lenders on one hand.
Yeah.
And even then I've got too many fingers. But now, for example, if you've got that idea, if you have the knowledge of what you can do with a property, there are umpteen bridging financiers around. And even if you've got nothing at all, I mean, as you know, I do this show called Property Elevator. People come on that show with no money at all. They just have the deal and the idea. And if there's a margin in it, and if they're backable, if they know what they're doing and they're on top of their game, they'll get full funding for it. So the options now are so much more. It's about having the knowledge and the idea and the deal in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. So what would you say some of the difference and challenges were? A couple more examples of what it was. So you mentioned one being, raising finance a lot easier now than it was then. What other challenges?
I think back then, I guess it was easier to get started from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah.
Regulations in a lot of the things that you did with property, whether it's developing them and it's letting them out, were very, very light touch.
Yeah.
Nowadays, what's very important is that you get educated to make sure you don't mess up.
Yeah.
Because ignorance of the law is no excuse. There's plenty of opportunity in property, but you've got to know what you're doing and not kind of fall foul of any regulations, even if it's just by ignorance.
Yeah. Do you know, now we're actually speaking about that and you've mentioned that, we've actually really come to the conclusion that it's a lot easier now. Because when I think about it, in terms of even finding deals and building up connections, so much comes online now. But even back then, so how did you go about finding deals? There was no Rightmove.
Well, yeah, it was just estate agents, talking to estate agents, building up traditional relationships with individuals. And I think the other big difference back then, the challenge was then, is you had to know your patch. Yeah. So you didn't really invest outside of a patch that you knew. And by knowing the patch, it would take pretty much 6 months pounding streets to actually fully understand the nuances of this street is rubbish, this street is good, this street has this potential, that potential. Nowadays, you can pick up any postcode you like and pretty much do research in a few hours. You don't have to actually have physical presence in an area to fully understand what it's all about. So that makes investing slightly easier from selecting the patch that actually makes sense to invest in.
Yeah. And also, you also started maybe one of the first training companies that were over here in the UK, which is it's quite big now. There's a lot of new training companies, a lot of people that are teaching property.
That's an interesting thing that you dug up. Yes. Back in 2003.
Yeah. So at that time, in the early 2000s, there wasn't much education at all for people getting involved in property. So talk about that challenge. Was that tough? Did you end up making a lot of expensive mistakes?
I mean, I know people like to say they made a lot of mistakes. I didn't actually make a lot of mistakes. Right. For me, property seemed to be reasonably logical and simple. What I discovered is that what I kind of thought was simple and relatively common sense is not that common.
Yeah.
So that's when I got involved in education. I mean, I got involved quite by accident in education. I had as a client of a mortgage brokerage as one of their largest customers, and they were involved in exhibiting in various shows and things.
Right.
And they asked me to kind of talk about how I actually did property to their clients.
At what point of an investor was you then? You had a few houses, or?
At that point, I was doing, it was mainly traditional buy-to-let.
Right.
So it was buying properties which were under market value, usually from motivated sellers who needed to sell quickly. Because I started at a time in the 1990s when mortgage debt was a reason why people would need to sell quickly and just dispose of their property. And as long as you're pretty much covering them for their mortgage debt, they're reasonably happy.
Yeah.
And you could do some simple works to the property and refinance it quickly at the market value.
Yeah.
Pull out a lot of your money, if not all of your money, and go again. So it was a relatively simplistic model. It was right for the time.
Yeah.
And it allowed you to build that portfolio. Because I think my starting point, the principle, if you like, is very similar to today, which is you've got to look at generating income. and you generate income from appreciating income-producing assets.
Yeah.
So you've got to invest whatever cash you've got in those income-producing assets. You've got to either buy. You make your money when you buy, so you've got to buy them a little bit under market value. You add a little bit of value to it as well, and the combination of doing those things allows you to pull out a lot of your cash that you got invested in the deal out.
Yeah.
And then you can go again. If you don't do that, you'll run out of money.
Yeah. So going back, want to try and get an understanding of like your mindset and how you kind of started at a time where property wasn't huge, not much education. So you bought your first property when you was how old?
8.
8.
Yeah.
Talk me through that one.
Well, I got a Monopoly set for Christmas.
I love that. Yeah.
And
nice.
I played it, and that's what it made sense.
Yeah.
You know, you buy as many properties as you can, and the people that own those properties and you develop them and all of that, they make the most rent and you win the game.
Yeah.
And as soon as I could, I transferred that into real life.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you said that because that's the theme of the show. You know, it's about money game. You know, it's about understanding that it's very similar to a game. It's got all the characteristics of a game: players, regulations, rules, objectives. You know, and if you can learn the game. Like I just think when people play a game, Monopoly or a video game, what do? We go and research everything we can about it. We figure out all the buttons, all the rules, and then we get good at the game.
Yeah.
But in terms of money, we don't do that. A lot of people
That's
don't
very,
do
very
that.
true.
We just accept that we're not good at it. Money just leaks everywhere. But no, so I'm glad you said that. So what about your first real property?
Real property was, I think I've always been entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
And I would encourage anyone to develop as many side hustles as they possibly can.
Yeah.
So through university, I was doing things like share trading, and I imported computers, Apple Macs, from the States, because at that time they were cheaper there than they were in the UK, and they would sell them here and that kind of stuff. And so I did all sorts of side hustles, share trading as well. And then at that time, you could only get a loan my parents weren't into business, they weren't into property, they were very much get a good job and that kind of thing. So I couldn't get their support for a parental guarantor to do what I wanted to do as a student. So until I got my first real job, I couldn't really do a property. So at that time, I basically graduated from university, took my contract of employment to a bank. I had the deposit, but they gave me 100% mortgage.
That's crazy.
So I bought a property, rented it out as rooms, and then kept on buying one every few months.
Why did you want to do that? What was your, you're quite young there. Not a lot of people at that age are like, I want to buy property, or they might think it, but they never actually go and take the action and do it. Why was that so important for you to own a property?
I think it's very, very important to develop those side hustles. I was in the profession of management consultancy, so I joined one of these big 4 management consulting firms, and and as a new graduate, I'd look at the partners, I'd look at the people in their 40s and 50s, and I didn't really aspire to their lifestyle.
Right.
So I realized that, you had to do that. You had to have something else.
Yeah.
And then what I kind of fell back on, if you like, was that logic of monopoly.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to go wrong with property. If you concentrate on making your money when you buy, you're pretty much pulled out most of your cash, if not all of it, within a quick time of purchase. And it keeps on generating you positive cash flow throughout your ownership of it. It's very, very difficult to go wrong with that sort of principle of investing. And then, of course, what happens is, as you build up that portfolio, the need to do the career, if you like, diminishes, and that takes over. We'll get back to the video in just a moment. What is the most exciting opportunity in property right now? And that is repurposing defunct commercial buildings to residential use. Now, most people don't really know where to start, what to look for, and how to exploit these opportunities. And that's why I've prepared 90 minutes of free training for you to get you started on this wonderful journey. You can register for this free training at property-workshop.com. Join me on that free training, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of the video.
So what I really like to do is understand the psychology and the mindset of why really successful entrepreneurs do what they do. So at that point, why you felt like it was important to have side hustles, but what was it? Was it you wanted money to buy things, you wanted luxury things, or you wanted to just survive and be able to provide for? Oh, I mean, at the time you were just young, so you didn't really have much like overheads or kids or anything like that. So what would you say? What was driving you then to kind of pursue that?
I think it was the main driver was having choice in your life.
Yeah.
And I saw people who were, because I've always looked at people who are 10, 20 years older than me, and looking at their lifestyles, and basically I'm thinking, is their path my path?
Yeah.
And if no, then I need to change track.
Yeah.
I think that's really been the guiding principle to my thinking. So that's when I needed to do a side hustle, and property is just something that makes sense.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people do trading businesses, and I think trading businesses are inherently risky. So much can change, and I think in my education business now, many people with successful trading businesses come to me because actually it's too risky to invest further in their trading business. It's better to take those profits and park them in real estate, which is far more stable over the long term. And you go back to the things like the Sunday Times Rich List, the biggest sector of wealth creation and preservation is the real estate sector.
Yeah, and you knew that back then?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the main reason why you wanted to get into property?
Yes.
Yeah. So as well, I also heard you say one time that I think you started in the early 90s, but you didn't actually meet anyone in property until the late 90s.
Oh, right, you've done a bit of research, haven't
course.
you? Yeah, very early 2000s, because...
Yeah, which is crazy. It was crazy. I wanted to know how you navigated through property with,
It was hard.
Yeah.
Because I was in a professional career, management consulting, and you did not have side hustles.
Yeah.
If you had a side hustle, you get fired. You're not meant to do that. So I couldn't network with anyone. The internet really wasn't that prevalent. There wasn't really networking meetings and all of that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something you talked about. And also, I had a little bit of a internal dilemma which I was wrestling with, which was I enjoyed property. I enjoyed property investing, property developing, the numbers side of it and all of that. But landlording was not seen as a very glamorous thing to do.
Cool. It wasn't cool.
There were sort of old guys who walked around with a big bunch of keys and taking cash on a Friday and all of that. The image of that. Cool. This is pre the term buy to let, wasn't that great? Yeah. And that didn't sit well with what I was doing, which was very much sort of city mirrored buildings, suits and all of that. It didn't really sit well with all of that. So there was a little bit of a dilemma. So I kind of kept it quiet. One thing I did find, because I left that career in 2001, and when I handed in my notice, everyone, when I mean everyone, people I was working with, bosses, they all started coming up to me and asked me what I was doing, how I was doing it, and all of that. And in the subsequent years, because I think I left in 2001, and then around about 2003, I spoke at the Property Investor Show in Excel, and they used my picture on the promotion. So I was all over the Tube and the Metro and all these magazines and things. And at that time, virtually every boss I'd ever worked with got in touch with me and basically said, I wish I'd done what you did.
Yeah.
Tell me more on this, that, and the other.
It's a cool outcome the way that turned out. And as well, you must have had a lot of courage and vision to kind of see through it past the point where it's not cool. Your parents necessarily don't agree with it as well.
That was true as well, yeah.
So that was another big hurdle to get over. There was not much support there.
Well, actually, when that happened, and I was on the Tube and everything, that was when their friends started calling them up, saying, your son does property. Then they started thinking it was a bit more cooler.
So they laugh and then they copy, don't they?
It gets there in the end anyway.
Yeah. So basically, in this day and age, in England, you got an iPhone, you're blessed. There's not much excuses to not be able to get into property. And it's definitely, we probably worked out now, it is easier now than it was back then.
It's easier now. I believe, firstly, because of the education that's out there, the knowledge that's out there, the ability. Yes, there's a lot of regulation. Yes, there's a lot of hurdles and whatever.
Yeah.
But you don't have to find that path on your own.
Yeah, yeah.
In the old days, you had to find that path on your own. Some people would make a lot of errors and crash and burn, and some people would succeed. Now, if you cut and paste what works and follow a tried and tested method, you can get there too.
Yeah.
It's just about having that drive and vision to get on with it.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. If you had started in this day and age, so let's say 2000 and just after the pandemic, if you had started then, the 21-year-old Ranjan, forward into 20 years, do you reckon you'd be worth a lot more than you are?
If I started now, what a hypothetical thing to say.
Yeah, it just popped up. I was like, I've got to ask that.
I would like to say, with the knowledge I have now?
No. So you start from scratch with the same raw qualities. So you had the drive, the courage, all the things you had back then, but you're starting from scratch. You're 21 years old in 2020, 20 years later.
I believe so.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Because I started one of the first Mastermind programs in the UK, a 1-year training program for property investment, started in 2003.
Yeah.
What I achieved from 1990 to 2000 or 2003 on my own with no help, I had people who had come on that started these programs in 2003 and were achieving in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Simply because they didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They didn't have to go down blind alleyways and dead ends and crash and burn. They could just cut and paste what worked.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I was trying to.
So yes.
Yeah. Okay, nice. One thing that I found was super interesting that you're doing, which I wanted to talk about, is the property elevator.
Yes.
Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about that? What it is?
Well, Property Elevator is a show that goes out in Sky, and it's a bit like Dragon's Den, but for property projects.
Yeah.
So people come along with a deal, and they're looking for funding for their property projects. So there are 5 of us angel investors on the show, and I'm one of them. We're up to series 4 now. We just filmed it last week.
Nice.
It's pretty basic, really. If people find a good deal, and they are likable, and they are knowledgeable, and they're on top of their brief. They've got that drive, vision, and passion, and you can normally tell that they'll sort of see it through. Then they'll get funding for it. And it's what I find interesting about that, being an angel on that show, is the way the pitch dynamic changes. Because at first, the entrepreneur's coming in and pitching their project, and they're doing the pitching. The minute it starts to look interesting, then the whole dynamic changes. It's us 5 angels pitching to the entrepreneur to say, look, work with us, kind of thing. We'll be your business partner on this. And it's interesting when you watch it to see when that dynamic changes, if it changes at all.
Yeah. What is there certain kind of trends that come on? Is there like, so a lot of the developers or the property guys that come on, do a lot of them have a wide range of different strategies and deals, or are they all kind of pretty similar? I
think it's a good question. I can't talk too much about series 4 because we've just filmed it and it's out in a couple of months. But generally, I'd say out of series 4, about 60% of the deals that were pitched involved commercial to residential conversion.
Okay, it's quite popular, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the reason for that is because you take a commercial building that's defunct, the values per square foot are often a third or a quarter of residential values per square foot. You've got a simplified planning regime to get the permission to convert to residential. And as soon as you've got that, the build out is relatively simple. You haven't got to build foundations, walls, windows, roofs. It's already there. It's internal configuration. So from an investor's point of view, you're backing something that has a little bit more certainty with the planning. You've got quick build out because the building's already structurally there. And you've got that value uplift because commercial values are so much lower than residential values. So that makes them investable. So that was one of the big trends, I guess, that came out of this this series. Yeah.
Have you invested in many from the show?
I've done a few. Done a few.
How they
done a
worked
few
out?
in some of them worked out sort of very well. Found some business partners that we continue to do other deals with.
Nice.
but quite a few on this. I mean, now I think I've done, this is my third series I've done, so they get to know which angel has a specialist interest in different areas. So I'm kind of known as the commercial to residential permitted development kind of guy.
Yeah. So someone that comes on with that is they kind of want you on.
Sometimes, sometimes you can see that.
It's a real Dragon's Den vibe, isn't it?
And that makes it quite easy to pitch back.
Yeah. Has anyone come on with, like a huge deal, like maybe from the ground up, proper development? Has anybody come on with one of those? Yeah,
there's some that come along like that. I mean, it's a mixed bag. It really is a mixed bag of people wanting 10, 20,000 pounds to millions of pounds.
Yeah. What's the most someone's come on and asked for?
Someone had a shopping centre once in
shopping centre.
Which was a knockdown and rebuild and all of that. But that actually got funding, not from me, but that actually got funding.
How much was that for? Can you say?
I can't remember. That was I think it was on series 3. But it's a mixed bag of deals. One of the most interesting entrepreneurs that came on, it just shows the variety on series 3. Some guy, young chap, he just run some Facebook ads, which basically said, do you know of any vacant properties in your area? He got a response from someone who knew of a vacant property. Turned out to be this guy, he had that probate sale and all of that in Acton somewhere. He just talked to he's got no money. He just invested some Facebook ads. And he did that a month before shooting of that show. Just talked to the vendor, because you don't need to actually finalize the deal.
Right.
Because the whole point of coming on the show is that you'll get a business partner who will work with you and back it and bring that to fruition.
Yeah.
So all his investment as a young guy with just some Facebook ads to get the lead, came along on the show, got a funder. I actually offered him on that, but one of the other angels beat me to it.
Yeah.
But he got that funding. That deal actually happened, and that was actually turned out to be an auction flip. Right. So basically, they bought the property, did virtually nothing to it, and flipped it on at an auction, and shared a profit. So it's a very enabling show that all you need to do is get off your backside and find a deal and a project. Come on it and get the funding.
It's a great idea. But also, do you know on Dragon's Den, I'm pretty sure you will need like so much information. You need to cover everything. So you're saying it's not absolutely like that on yours. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have it secured, have all the appraisals written out. They literally kind of just have an opportunity and an idea. An opportunity
and an idea. People normally come on with they prepare a little pitch deck, and we only get them about 10 minutes before they come on to pitch.
Yeah.
So it's normally a few pages with numbers and risks and whatever they want to kind of put in a pitch deck. So we do get some numbers. Some people have got certain things validated, like if it's a planning feasibility study by a planning consultant or something like that. So it depends on what people want to present to make their pitch more sort of confident.
Nice. You taken on any new applicants? Are you taking on any new applicants? Maybe anyone in the audience that has a deal they want to come on?
If people are interested, that we are shooting Series 5 in September. It's propertyelevator.tv. Go on there and you can apply to be on.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Something else I wanted to go over is one thing that I've kind of realized about you, that I think a good trait that you have is that you're able to move with times. So the fact that you got a really good YouTube channel, you put out a lot of content, even coming here, you got your own camera guy, you're calling a lot. Maybe a lot of people that are a bit old school don't do that as much. So why is that important for you? Why'd you do that? Why do you feel the need to keep going down different avenues?
I think you've got to, as you say, keep with the times. And I think previously to YouTube, you would press a lot of flesh, I guess, which is still very important, going to networking events and such like that.
Yeah.
I think video is a way to reach a far vaster audience than you could ever do by just going to sort of traditional events and meeting people in person. Mm-hmm. And I think I found myself, because I used to write a lot, for various industry magazines and the like. You know, people liked what I read, but I found that I've got dyslexia. So, you know, if I'm writing an article, it just takes me all weekend. You know, and I've only written 1,500 words, but I can go along and do a YouTube video, get a lot more views.
Got you.
And present that information in less than an hour, and it seems to get a lot more traction. So one of it's partly, I think, video is the future, and it's partly that I was struggling with the written word.
yeah. But then, what is it in it for you that you enjoy about it, or the reason why you're doing it? Is it to stay in the game? You just like playing the game? What is it?
Well, it's property. My game is property. I find by I mean, these days it helps to, if you have a specialism, mine's property. If you're an influencer in that specialism, then that helps you with every aspect of what you do. So it helps me get deals. It helps me with financing. It helps me win competitive bids. We have a training and education business, and I train people in what I do. I joint venture with people on my training programs. We give them funding. We joint venture equity-wise as well. We're doing a project at the moment in Leicester where we bought an old bank building, and 21 of our students have put up over £1 million, and we're doing that project together. So it's learning and investing together. So I find that there are a lot of synergies between doing a lot of different stuff in property. And by putting some stuff out there on YouTube and putting my viewpoint or putting out what we do, it just brings more and more people, more and more partners to do business with.
I know we keep going back and talking about like being old school and that. You're not actually that old, are you? You're still...
No, I don't think so.
Like,
I don't think so.
Saying, oh,
I'll invite you to my 30th birthday.
But no, you're just, for me, you're just really active, which is really good to see. But so what have you got going on at the minute in terms of property and deals?
What have I got going on at the minute? Well, mostly commercial to residential conversions. So at the moment, there are lots of, there's some new rules that have been introduced a few months ago that allow these commercial buildings to be converted relatively light touch. So it's taking small offices, shops with upper parts and stuff like that, converting them into residential use. That's the main thing. And there are lots of nuances like that. I mean, bank buildings are quite exciting at the moment. So quite a few of those sort of projects on the go. That's my main bag, really.
What do you think about holding and selling? Is your main aim always to hold? Have you sold a lot?
Not really.
No,
I haven't really done too much selling.
Purposely, right?
It doesn't make sense. Here's the thing, right? If I buy a property and there is at least 30% margin in it, then that means that at the end of the project, I can pretty much refinance it with a lender at 70% loan and pretty much come out with very little or no money invested in the deal. And if on top of that, it's producing positive cash flow, what's the point of selling?
So the times that you have sold, what was the reason for that? Was it maybe to raise finance or?
I've literally sold one or two. I've sold very, very few. I haven't sold anything we've developed. In the early part of my career, we bought flats in other people's blocks. And those have service charges, and the cost of ownership is a little bit high. So we've disposed of some of those. But the stuff that we've built, if you've built a block of 8 flats, you've got a good income generating asset there. And you've got full control over the freehold. You don't have high service charges and the cost of operations and all of that. To me, it doesn't make sense to sell.
I know we touched on a couple of times on your training company that you do, and you still do, right?
Yes.
What are your kind of thoughts on training companies this day and age, the ones that you see? Do you see good things? Do you see bad? Do you see mixed?
It's... I think, well, of course it's mixed. Of course it's mixed. I think the big issue is why are people doing training?
Right.
I think there are a lot of people out there doing training where that's basically their main business. if you do a little search on Companies House or whatever, there's not much behind.
Oh, you mean rather than actually doing deals themselves
Yeah,
and
yeah.
actively?
Or the training business, the training income is actually what they're using to invest in property.
Yeah.
You have to look a little bit deeper to find training companies where there's actually a solid property business behind it, and really the training is just a small part of it.
Yeah.
There are various accreditation bodies. There's the Property Investors Bureau that set up a industry self-regulation, if you like, to accredit training providers. So there's a process that you go through to get accredited. So we're members of that.
Yeah.
But I think one of the big issues is if what I advise people, if you're looking at training, who's your trainer? Where is their footprint? If the majority of their footprint should be in property and doing property deals and not training.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's going to be my next question: is someone looking to get involved in property, they want to get educated. What do they look for? How do they know the right company or the right person to do that?
I think it's track record, it's experience, it's also having the consistency. Because people who have just done one or two strategies over the last few years that they've learned haven't got the depth and breadth and the standing of time to see through everything that cycles throw at you to make sure that you're going to actually last, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's simple. I think now, for example, it's far easier to check out an educator than ever before. We now have a situation where most people, well, if you're doing property as a business, you will have a business.
Yeah.
And that business will have to report accounts. Several years ago, there were people with 100 properties. They weren't incorporated into limited companies, and you couldn't really find out much about them. But if they say something, then you should be able to find some footprint on Companies House to say, look, okay, there is a sizable business here, and they're not just running a training company and that's it.
Yeah.
I think now more than ever, you've got to be a doer. You can't just be a teacher, because the landscape has changed quite a lot. What worked in most aspects of property just 3-4 years ago simply does not work today.
Yeah. And they have to have done the new.
Yes, you've got to have done it now.
Yeah.
Whether it's development, whether it's commercial to residential conversions, whether it's HMOs, doesn't matter what aspect it is. If your experience is just 3, 4, 5 years out of date, it is not relevant now.
Yeah. How did you go about getting educated? At the time where it started getting a bit more popular, you would have been thoroughly in the game already. Maybe the early 2000s, 2003s, where maybe people that have been doing property for a long time and maybe decided to open up training companies. Did you then go and search for more knowledge and training at that time? Or did you just think, I've already done 10 years in property, I know my stuff, I'm just going to keep learning as I go? Or did you go out and source some more education?
I haven't really sought education because I've always been, I kind of do. And you have to innovate according to the sort of circumstances. So when, like with I mentioned there were some new permitted development rules introduced on August the 1st. By the end of August, we'd already submitted applications under those new rules when they were just 3-4 weeks in. And people weren't doing that.
Yeah.
So people don't have that practical experience. So, even now people haven't made their first applications under these new rules.
Yeah.
So this is all you can't go on if something's brand new, if something's just changed, you're at the leading edge of it because you're doing it.
Yeah.
And then you're using that knowledge to kind of train other people and help other people.
Yeah. So Ranjan, I'm going to wrap this up with a quick fire round just to get your take on a few things. So minimal words, maybe an explanation if it calls to one. So first one, I think we know this already actually, but what's your favorite property strategy?
Oh, commercial to residential
I was
conversion.
going to say that, yeah. One or two typical mistakes people make when investing in property?
Overpaying.
Overpaying.
Make your money when you buy. That's when it all starts.
Yeah. You got another one?
Spending too much on renovations,
Okay.
pretty much.
If you had 100K right now, so you had to name 100K to invest, what would you do?
I'd find the right commercial to residential conversion deal and use that as a deposit.
Yeah, nice. What is your thoughts on? I know we spoke off camera. You got a few kids. What is your thoughts on passing down wealth to your kids?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think it's good to give your kids some security, but I think it's important that it's earned, so that you understand the value of money. Basically, it's very, very important to understand the value of money first. So
if you felt like it wasn't earned, you wouldn't do it. You'd necessarily hold off on passing it down. Or?
I think as long as the value of money is understood.
Yeah.
Because I'm at an age now where I see people inherit money. Because this is the other interesting thing about money. When people inherit a lot, they're usually at an age where they should be established anyway.
Right. Yeah.
You know, there's helping kids along their journey through life, which is the early stages of life, 20s, 30s, you know, and all of that.
Yeah.
But when a lot of people inherit a lot, they're often at an age where they should be reasonably established.
Yeah.
And I think I do see a lot of people who take that inheritance and because it's unearned, just splash it on something silly.
Yeah. So last thing, just to add on to that. So I've got 2 kids as well, young kids. And yours are older, they've been at uni, and were there any specific things and protocols that you kind of put into them in terms of, financial education as they grew up to get them to a point that, could be ready to pass over, your wealth and certain properties? Or?
It's the values.
Yeah.
It's the main thing is the values.
Yeah.
And just taking them around sort of property projects and stuff like that to kind of get that bug ignited in them and that kind of thing. But the values are the main thing. And I think property is a very good home for those sort of values. Here's the thing. I think if someone with property, it is, if one generation starts a property business, property does very well over time, as we all know. So if a subsequent generation then picks that up, they're starting off from a completely different advanced position than if they started off on their own.
Yeah.
And I think when you are doing that, the skills and knowledge and experience required to start a property business is different from the skills and knowledge and experience required to take on an established property business. If you're just buying your first HMO, you need some little bit of training and knowledge, but there's only a certain amount that you need. But if you're taking on an established business of several properties and a significant amount of real estate, then it's a different skill set that you need from someone that's starting off. It's more formalized training and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I think it's it is very much about instilling the values and the education to be able to take what you've built onto the next level.
Yeah. Got you. Perfect. No, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for playing the money game with us. It's good to see you.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
High streets across the land are changing forever. Basically, there's an oversupply of retail premises. Shops are closing down, more are going to close down in the future. The government know this, and that's why they're introducing a light touch planning system which allows small developers to easily repurpose these buildings to residential use under a light touch planning regime called permitted development. Now, this is going to be the biggest revolution and the biggest change and the biggest opportunity for property investors that I've ever seen. And this is all coming into effect on 1st of August. So you need to know what's happening and what properties to look for to take advantage of these opportunities so that you can get in there and take that first mover advantage. I've got a 90-minute free masterclass to get you ready for August the 1st. Make sure you join me, click the link below. Whether you're a beginner or expert, we'll get you started.